and the cat was off her food, but then she started sneezing. She let this huge sneeze out, and this massive bit of grass, ornamental grass, shot out of her nose. So my wife just grabbed it, and then she was fine, and the cat was all right as well. You're listening to the Beat Motel podcast, and we need to warn you that we like to use words like fuck, shit, and syndicalus, butty scrutux, angry flap, and foot biscuits, and we don't often bleep those words out, apart from because we're not complete animals. But if you understand that and you like music, then listen on. Hey, you're back with Beat Motel podcast, and Dr. Sam is sorting his giblets or doing something or other. So I'm very honoured to have one of my favourite musical people, well, one of my favourite people, I think it's fair to say, Mr. Stuart Bowditch. Welcome back to Beat Motel.
Oh, hi, that's very generous of you. Thank you.
Well, particularly fond of you for your organisation, along with our other friend Ben, of the Cuckoo Farm gig in Colchester at the weekend.
Yeah, it was great, but I was done because it was like the gig run from like 1 till nearly midnight, and we got there at 10. So it was a long day. But,
it was so cool though. It's the first noise gig that I've taken my daughter to, she's 12, and it's such a good atmosphere just to like hang and chill out with other families amongst other things. But just as we were driving away, we'd made it about 100 yards away from Cuckoo Farm, and she just said, "Can I go to more noise gigs?" That's like, the sickness is upon her. It has taken her at a young age. So I just want to celebrate
people there, which was great actually. You know, like Matt's daughter Eva, who's 7. She came to one of my workshops and she made a load of noise on my gear, but it got recorded and then gave the recording to Matt, and she loved it and put it onto a CD and made the album art for it, and then made a limited edition of 5. So I'm a proud owner of one of those now.
Oh wow, that's so cool. So that's Matt Birds, we've started calling him, but Matt from There Are No Birds Here, who I think I probably need to get on the podcast at some point. He's always doing interesting things and just a nice person to hang out with.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, I've been doing a bit of work with him over the last few months. Well, since the end of last year. So it's been fun.
Cool. Right, before we reveal what the theme for this episode is, because it's a doozy, I'm going to play your riff of the week. That is, what a wonderful piece of music. Who's that by, Stuart?
That's by Sibelius, and it's called Finlandia. My dad used to listen to classical. Well, he still does listen to classical music, and kind of grew up listening to all kinds of stuff. But that particular piece, I did hear it when I was a kid, and then I heard it again when I was sort of like, I suppose, a young adult, and it just kind of took me back to being a child again. But I just if you imagine that being played with like an entombed guitar tone, heavy as hell, that is just like a massive riff. Like, you know, like that's, you'd be diving off a stage to that, you know.
That is a hell of a riff, and I think Jimmy Page might be misquoted, but Jimmy Page said that the guitar replaces the need for an orchestra, and I don't agree with him there in the slightest. But you can see there's so much crossover between metal and that type of classical music.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there has been a lot of metal bands use orchestration, or, you know, like little ambient pieces, or there's a huge kind of, I think they complement each other really well, which is what we're kind of going to get into a bit today, I think. So
there's a guy I know called John Phipps who does the orchestration for metal bands. He's worked with Moonspell and bands like that. And there's a connection back to you, because I've known him through bands for years and years and years, but he also played for a little while with Dan Merrill from Dead Rat Orchestra. Oh, right. I believe you know, you're friends with those guys. So there you go. That's a nice link there, isn't it? Yeah. Was Sibelius Finnish?
He was, yeah. And I just was reading up about it actually, and that the Russians were sort of imposing a lot of censorship on the Finns at that time, sort of early 20th century. So it's actually a protest song, that piece of music, and it's also called. It's actually, if you look at it on Wikipedia, obviously, it's actually called a tone poem. So I thought that was quite interesting. I need to read more up about that actually. So
The video that you sent me over was one of those really strange videos. Obviously, Sibelius wasn't known for his video work, so people put together backing visuals for these videos. And that one, for one thing, it's loads of shots of Finland, and I love the bits of Finland I've seen. And Dr. Sam obviously lives in Finland,
yeah,
but there's one bit that made me really laugh. Towards the end of that clip, there's a duck, and there's a duck walking along. You're like, cool, I like ducks. And then it jumps and it clings to a tree like a squirrel. And I thought, I did not know ducks could do that.
yeah, it made me laugh. All the little the birds in the nest and they're all fledging and that, and it's quite joyous, isn't it? Which I suppose the music is a bit, but when you sort of realise all of the things I've just said about why it was written, it's probably not joyous at all. So
Probably not the intention, but a lot's been lost, the translation over the years, I guess. But no, I'm going to look up more Sibelius. Every bit I've heard I like. When Classic FM first became a thing in the UK, listened to it a lot. Don't tend to listen to it so much now because it's become like, it's like they've made a radio station out of one of those Now albums. You're like, now that's what I call classical. That probably exists actually, doesn't it?
yeah,
You
it's
kind of
like
switch it on, you're like, oh, it's this again.
it's like Radio 2 for classical music, isn't it? You know, like,
What a great description. Right. This is my riff of the week. Oh, they're building a tension with that guitar just rising and rising through that. Do you want to have a guess of who that was, Stuart?
well,
It's really unfair to ask.
any idea, but there's so many influences in there, you know, and especially like obviously the musical differences, you know, it's quite a hodgepodge of stuff, but then the vocals come in with that massive sort of delay on them, and it's like it's just another level of something weird. There's a lot of things all going in there. I don't have any idea, I'm afraid. Sorry.
They're called. I'm going to give you what I think they're going to call, and I'm going to tell you how it's spelt. So it's Man, Woman, Chainsaw, and that song was called What Lucy Found There, but it's actually man / woman / chainsaw with no spaces in between, which as a writer does trouble me a little bit. But it's a band that we saw at Brighton the Corners a few weeks ago in Ipswich, the festival, and they have a brilliant knack of booking basically really young bands. They look like early 20s, and we walked in just as they were kicking into that riff and just sort of looked and just went, that's brilliant. That's so cool. It's so many bands when they're sort of on their way up. There's quite a lot of landfill indie around at the moment. I hate to say it. There's a lot of bands that sound like second or third generation Arctic Monkeys, basically, and we see a lot of it. So walking in and seeing someone with I think it was a viola rather than a violin, and someone actually doing like jazz bass on a bass guitar, and then the guitars are still quite screechy with that, and it was like a triumphant moment. It was like walking in for the end scene of a film or something. It's just like, yeah, everyone lives, and the whale is safe, and the aliens are now our friends, and all the good stuff's happening.
Well, that's the best thing about sort of festivals, isn't it? Is you just discover all these things that you would never discover otherwise. So
we've talked about ATP festivals on here before, and they were brilliant for that, apart from one, and that was one that was curated by Godspeed You Black Emperor. And I can only assume that they wanted everyone to suffer. Because you'd like walk into a room. Actually, this is a point. It was years ago. You'd walk into a room, hear like difficult music, and like halfway through the weekend, you just, oh God, just do something nice, play something nice, because my tastes have changed, I want to go and look and see who that was now, because they probably did put on some quite awesome stuff that I've now sort of come round to. Actually, the big headliner of that festival was Weird Al Yankovic. So
really?
it was like, well done, you've made it through all this difficult electronica and awkward music. Now you can just have some fun. You've earned it.
He was right at the end.
Yeah, they did a whole massive stage shows at Butlins in Minehead, and he had the flu, but he was absolutely brilliant. I had no idea he's genuinely a virtuoso accordion player.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like one of the best in the world kind of level. I think that's a difficult instrument to sort of decide to pick up when you're a kid, isn't it? Even physically.
Well, yeah, but also, you know, like he has such a specific sort of flavour and approach to what he does that you don't even think about that side of his work, do you? So
no, he's a stealth accordion player. Right then, so you chose the theme for this week, and it has been quite hard work to find some tracks for it, which is good. So what is our theme, Stuart?
It's church organs in contemporary music.
Which, when you suggested it, I just went, yeah, that'll be fun, until I sat down trying to find some music, and then I found it really quite challenging.
Yeah, well, I've been listening to this podcast for quite some time now, so I've been thinking of some ideas, you know, and things I'm interested in. I've got a few other riffs of the week up my sleeve, by the way. But
cool.
And then you showed me a list, didn't you, from a month or so ago, and I looked through and I was like, none of them really jumped out, so I kind of just plumped for this one. But then,
it's cool.
Like you, I was like, well, I had a couple of songs, but then I was like, oh, I've got to dig a bit deeper. But actually, that was great because I got to listen to loads of good music on the way. So
it's one of the things I really like about doing this podcast is that long list of ideas is almost become a running joke, because we look at it every week and then just do something new anyway. So that there's loads of things on there that will probably never happen. But let's go for your first choice, because I think I can sort of almost foresee quite a narrative thread through both our sets of choices here. So okay. Here is your first choice. I was wondering how much air organ might pop up during this episode. Who was that, Stuart?
That was Typo Negative with Zero Tolerance, and it's not quite the bit that I chose, I don't think.
Oh shit! Sorry.
No, it's nearly there, but there's a bit of just one line of vocals that comes in, which I thought set it off quite nicely. But that's all cool. But yeah, also why I chose that bit is because you've got like the church organ, which isn't a real church organ, because Josh Silver would have just played it on the keyboard. But obviously it's layered with, you know, the guitars and the drums and everything. So, but it goes back to what we said earlier, you know, like a lot of metal and heavy music does use a church organ. And I was thinking about it, you know, church or organs have been around since like the Roman times, and if all through, you know, the Middle Ages and medieval times, you would have had this church, this enormous building with this enormous, you know, organ in it, which makes a huge sound. And if you imagine that sort of with all the little tiny houses around it, you know, how imposing that would have been, you know, within the village or the town or whatever, and just the power of it, you know, in the space, you know.
It's I grew up going to church, a village called Wicker Market, and my two of my friends were the vicar's sons, and it's the first band I was ever in with these two guys and another chap who now runs the music college in Norwich. And because that meant we had keys to the church, we used to go play with the organ quite a lot, literally play. There was no other way to describe it. And we'd try and figure out contemporary music at the time. So I can remember we worked out Cubic Olympic by 808 State on it. Like, do, 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 do. But the volume of a proper church organ is something that I wanted to discuss for a minute, because anyone listening to this who hasn't actually physically been in front of a church organ or heard it might be quite shocked at just how powerful that sound is. But yeah, it's a really good point. In the village, you imagine, like, going about your life. This is any time up until the 60s probably. You wouldn't have heard any music super loud unless you were lucky enough to go and see an orchestra.
Yeah, I think they're quite incredible, instruments. And I was reading up a bit about them, and there was one in Winchester Cathedral, which is kind of meant to be one of the biggest. But it took 70 men to like power it, like to get enough,
70?
ridiculous, to get enough, air going through the system in order for it to be played. I mean, that's a lot of dedication, isn't it? But that's the kind of hold that religion had over people at the time. And if you went to this big church, and revered, I'm not a religious person, but I'm still kind of in awe of, the sound of that organ in a church. And whenever I go to a church and the organ comes on, I mean, I've normally got my recorder handy, but just to hear it and feel it, in that space, it's you would see why people would feel a certain way when they went into a church.
Well, certainly, if they're trying to get that the feeling of awe that we now get from loud music in many, many different forms, it's a real particular. Even if you don't like music, it's going to affect you. It's going to do something to you. So you can kind of see that, the sermons might have been a bit dull, but then the reward might be some sort of ripping music on the organ.
Yeah, and you would probably sing along to some hymns or whatever, and that sound as well. The sound of people all coming together in that sort of acoustic space. It's impressive, isn't it?
It is. That's one of the things I really liked about going to church. I'm not religious myself either, but the vicar was also, he was a music teacher. I think he certainly had a degree in music. And he was obsessed with organ music, so he had this massive stereo in the vicarage, huge speakers. And I can remember for some reason we ended up going into Ipswich with him because he wanted to buy a CD player. And the reason he was so interested in CD players is that he used to play his organ music off vinyl so loud that it used to make the needle jump. So it was so insanely loud, and he'd sort of figured out that, hey, I can listen to CDs and they don't skip, and the volume just went up. When I was walking to their house, you'd hear it about 100 yards away, and whilst people might complain about drum and bass or metal or something coming out, you'd have to be hard pushed to complain about organ music, wouldn't you?
Yeah, maybe that's the way to go then, I
used to go to organ recital. I was really pleased you chose this. Go on.
We've got a delay going on.
I was just going to say, we have got a bit of a delay, yeah.
What I was going to say was at the Cuckoo Farm gig is that we had a similar problem with the needles on the turntables, and we had some really bad feedback going on. So in the end, Thanasis, who was playing, he just had to give up because it was just too much. So
oh no, really?
But yeah, I can imagine
problem. There's a brilliant place, Holbrook. There's a place called Holbrook near here, and there's the Royal Hospital School, which is actually still is a naval school, really old place. And they had a fantastic organ in there that we used to go and listen to. And I was so shocked how loud it was. I'd been going to gigs by then. I'd gone to gigs at like the Waterfront and places like that, which I always thought was shockingly loud, but nothing really prepared me for just how loud the organ is. You've awoken all these. It's been like a Proustian rush. You've awoken all these memories that I've really enjoyed by suggesting this title.
Oh well, I'm pleased about that. So
yeah. It got to the stage where you go to church, you go to other churches. It's just what it happened, and me and my friends became really judgmental about one really specific thing about going to visit another church. It was always we'd go backstage. They don't call it that in the church. We'd go behind the organ and try and find the biggest bass pipe. And if it was less than about 45 centimeters diameter, we'd be like, "It's rubbish." Yeah, so people say teenagers are judgmental, but yeah, we were, but just in a really strange way.
There was I played this little festival near Southend in 2006 and 7, and it was basically on a farm, and the farmer had like this really old brick barn on it. Anyway, so a lot of that was one of the stages, and they had a tent outside, which was another stage. But no one seemed to realise that just to the side of the stage in the brick barn was this organ, until someone did notice it, and then everyone was like, "What?" And then we want to hear that, and he was like, "Come back on Sunday morning, and I'll fire it up." So,
Wow.
so he did, and but not only was it was quite small. It came out of a cinema originally, because with silent films, you used to have a pianist or an organist who used to play along to the silent film. So, but he rescued it from another. I can't remember. It went on a bit of a journey, but basically ended up with him. But not only did it have an organ, it had another mode where it had like a drum kit on it. So it could play percussive things with the keyboard as well. And when it fired up, it was like, "What the hell is that?" But it was great. Then you realise actually like how diverse it could be. You could have fixed loads of different things to it.
The way that church organ are laid out, they have what looks like something that's not a million miles away from a synth. Like those cheesy Casio synths that we had in the 80s, and you had a button on it that would say like French horn, and it'd go, and another button would say like, I don't know, electric guitar, and you press it and it would go, make exactly the same sound. Organs have these things called pulls, like they're massive. You put them out like 30 centimeters, and they all say stuff like flutes, trombone, and they probably do a better job than the Casios did, actually, but just a lot less portable.
Yeah, so I think it's slightly a bit more work's gone into them to like.
Right. My first choice is really obvious, I'm afraid, but I just thought I just need to get it out the way because it's the first thing that popped into my head. Bass. Do you want to have a guess at who that was, Stuart?
Well, I didn't recognise it, and then I realised I didn't know who it was.
You might be surprised. Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, put me out of my misery, please.
Led Zeppelin.
Oh, right, okay. So I probably have.
Yeah, so it's Led Zeppelin with Your Time Is Gonna Come. And to be fair, out of context, that bit from sort of the intro build-up sounds nothing like the rest of the song at all. But I really thought about it and I really listened to it, because one of the dangers of putting these tracks together is that trying to spot the difference between an actual pipe organ and like a Hammond organ or Farfasia sound slightly different. It's quite difficult, but I thought that could be a pipe organ. They would have had the money and the budget to kind of do something like that.
Yeah, or they just could have just hung out where there was one and, jammed along with it or something.
I want to hang out where there's church organs and jam along with them. That sounds like a life goal. Nuts to having a Mercedes and a big house. I want to jam with a church organ.
Well, I think, churches are struggling to get people to keep going into them. So, I tried to put on a gig in church before lockdown, and the church were really up for it. And then I got someone who you're going to hear in a minute, but to play, plus a few other people, and it was all going ahead. We went and met the organist, and he was cool, yeah. And I had a little tinker on it, but I can't play, so it's a bit embarrassing. But but then a bit further down the line, just a few weeks before the gig, he suddenly had a change of heart, and he was like putting all these things in the way of it, saying, it's not been serviced for ages, and like I've been listening to some of the people that you've got coming, and they're going to play big long notes on it, and I'm like, and basically just made it so difficult that we just had to cancel the gig.
Oh man, that's disappointing. But a long note's a problem. That sounds like a really odd, really tenuous complaint.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he said, these people are very avant-garde, you know. And I was like, well, yeah, that's why we booked him, you know. But I don't know. I think there was a bit of he was his baby basically, and he'd been playing it for, you know, however many decades. And while the idea of someone coming and playing, you know, and having a concert in the church was obviously quite a nice one at the start, once the reality set in of, you know, someone's going to be thrashing it. So he wasn't so into the idea of it, you know.
You mentioning that has unlocked a vaguely related memory. Growing up, going to church, we used to go on these like activity holidays during the summer with like a bunch of other kids from loads of other churches, I guess. And they were always in boarding schools. And some of the boarding schools we went to, not that different to like Harry Potter school. I can't remember what it's called, Hogwarts. So there'd often be somewhere with a massive organ. And I can remember walking between like the dorms and somewhere else, and somebody was playing the organ. And I was like, wow, it's amazing. So I stood and listened to this. Happened about 3 times, and just really enjoying hearing someone play an organ. It was like behind a locked door. We weren't allowed in that area. And I thought, wow, I wonder who that was. And then one day the music stopped, and this girl who was the same age as us, well, as I was then, which would have been like 15, 16, came out. And it turns out her parents lived abroad, so she had to stay in the boarding school more or less by herself during long periods of the summer. So she was, you know, bored and lonely, so would just go and play the organ. But she played brilliantly. And being a stupid teenager, I can remember thinking, wow, she's so pretty and she's so cool, and she gets to like play an organ for fun. And she invited me back to her dorm, and I totally just went, no, it's all right. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. And it's one of those like teenage things. Years later, I was like, what was she like? Was she propositioning me? Like, was that what was happening? And I was a teenage boy, so I didn't understand.
At the very worst, you would have got to play on the organ.
Now, other people I know who say a line like that, it would sound dripping with double entendre, but you know, it sounded perfectly innocent the way you say it. Right, let's go on. We've got something to say, or shall I play the next track?
No, play the next one. Yeah.
Here we go. I hate that we had to cut that off. Who was that, Stuart?
That was Clair Singer with a track called The Molendinar, and she was the woman who I just said that we booked for that church gig. She's actually the chief organist at the Union Chapel in Islington, which is an amazing like octagonal church. And I've played there a few times myself. Actually, it's really incredible. And but she plays there regularly, obviously. But she also runs a festival called Organ Reframed, and it's like a whole weekend of like contemporary organ music. And I went, and she played that track. It's like 25 minutes. She just played that one track, but it starts from nothing and ends up in this huge kind of rapturous, like thundering kind of the whole place is just full of this enormous sound. It's really incredible. It's quite emotional, actually, you know. But yeah, it was incredible. Yeah.
I love the big shifts in the bass. I think I've said bass every track I've played so far, but it's just because it's almost when an organ's that big and that loud, that shift between two bass notes almost like shifts the tension of the atmosphere in the room. You know, it's such a big thing. I've just remembered the other really judgmental thing we used to have about churches, and that was how long the reverb tail was. So at the end of like organ recordings, there's always stop, and you can hear St Paul's was always like our favourite, but you can hear the reverb rolling and rolling and rolling, and it'll go for like, I'm probably misremembering, like 20, 30 seconds sometimes, just thundering down the church. It's so cool. So
really.
is this
They're massive acoustic, instruments, aren't they? Churches. So, the organ definitely made use of that, space to sort of amplify it. Yeah.
Oh, they're built in, aren't they? They're very much a part of the fabric of the building. And I think in several cathedrals I've been to over the years, if it's a really big organ, it will be almost the midpoint of the church. They're like small village churches. The organ will be at the end against one of the side walls, in the choir stalls. But really big cathedrals, it's almost like that's the feature of the whole passage. That's the feature of the whole place, and it must be put there specifically. I suppose if it's in the middle, the sound's not going to bounce too quickly off any wall, is it? It's going to just flood it a bit more.
Yeah, it would come back sort of equally, wouldn't it, or more equally if it was in the middle. Yeah,
I'm going to look that up. I'm going to read up on reverb and churches. It sounds like a very wholesome thing to do. That was lovely, though. I really liked that, and that was the timestamp for that was 20 minutes and 45, and it goes on for some time after that.
Yeah, that's not the latest timestamp that I've sent you either. So,
oh no! Right, let's. I'm afraid we never promise. We never promise accuracy. I am going to play. I'm going to play one. I got a little stuck, so I had to reach out to some friends. So I reached out to Rocky from These Are End Times, and this was his suggestion, but I think he chose well. We are dead. When we are dead. So that's the first sort of mournful bit of church organ there. Do you have a guess at who that was? I'd be so impressed.
No, I've got literally no idea. Sorry.
It's a band, actually a band much like Typo Negative. No, they're not like Typo Negative. It's a band like Typo Negative that I see written down and hear spoken about so often, but I've never actually dug into. It's the Incredible String Band. And that song's Darling Belle. Have you not heard of the Incredible String Band?
No. Sorry.
I think late 60s. That's all right. This podcast is over. One of those band names, possibly, that now you've heard it, you'll get that sort of cognitive alignment that you'll start to notice it written places, and you'll start to hear it more often. They're one of those bands, sort of hugely influential, but might not have ever actually had any success. But I just thought that was well, thank you, Rocky. That was a lovely little bit of organ there, and that really did sound like a church organ.
Well, what I liked about it is it really sounded like you're in the space. Whereas some of them, I think, more modern recordings, you do record the space, but it's not so obvious.
The Incredible String Band were for the British psychedelic, they call it, and that is late 60s. So just the recording techniques of the time would have had to have been, bung some mics at different points in the church to catch it. It wouldn't be any of the really special kind of things that we do now. And I think there's a sort of a purity to it because of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then that's kind of what helps you to date something when you listen to music that's older. All sort of recorded music is before now, isn't it? So you can try and like date it by just listening to different techniques that we use to record it, or different equipment, or different voices or whatever. I find that fascinating when you listen to something that you've never heard before, like your brain just racing, trying to sort of pick up on these little nuances to try and sort of get inside it a bit.
That that awareness and use of old recording techniques or specific microphones even has almost become a tool or an instrument in its own. So you and I have talked before about Ed Rome from The Big, and they did a second version of one of their albums where they captured so perfectly the sound of like the Scatterlights. And they weren't playing ska, but they had that sound, that really specific sound. The Slackers have done it really well as well. Just going, well, we want this to sound like it was recorded in Jamaica in 1968, and they did it, which is lovely.
Yeah, he said that exact thing to me. Yeah, I want this.
Oh, really?
4 Jamaicans sitting in a room in 1960, whatever, and like he kind of researched it to the nth degree. You know, what microphones you would have used, what mixing desks, whatever, and who and techniques and different instruments or whatever. And Ed's really amazing like that. You know, each of his albums has a different flavour, and he really digs into that, all of those things, in order to try and make it sound as authentic, as possible. So
he succeeds. I clipped a bit of. I used a song by The Big in the previous episode, so I had to. It's not easy to find. I mean, that band name was not translated well into the internet era to try and find them, but I did find via his Bandcamp, and holy crap, he's still so prolific. He puts out a lot of music, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah, I think he's got a new album coming out soon as well. And yeah, I mean, he's worked with some really incredible people over the years as well, and he's played with incredible people. So yeah, he's probably like one of the most musically talented people that I know. So I'm pleased. I'm pleased that he's happy to work with me occasionally.
Hey, didn't know. What have you recorded together before?
No, we haven't recorded anything, but I've put some of his stuff out on my label, and he masters all the Courier stuff.
Oh, does he really? Sorry, we ought to mention your label. Yeah, Courier is. It's the full name is just Courier, isn't it? Or Courier Records?
It is. Yeah, it's just called Courier. Yeah, we just like bring little parcels of sound.
I never put much thought into the name. That's a genius name. Well done, Stuart.
all of the catalog numbers are parcel 1, 2, 3 or packet. Depending on the style of the format they go out on.
The releases that you put out, I just want to say to anyone who's listening, tapes are a real thing in our world. They're really sort of, I wouldn't say cornerstone, but they are a big part of it. And every time I look at any of your releases, the amount of work that you must have to go to put these releases together, because they're not just in a shell case or whatever. They're actually, you make the cases. And what do you die cut them, or using a scalpel or something?
Well, I do it with my friend Nick Dawson, who's also called Umig as his artist name. We've got a plotter cutter. Well, he's got one, and he cuts each one out individually, which takes like 7 minutes to do a cassette. So, and then we have to fold them, and cut all the inserts, print all. We do it all ourselves. So yeah, it's a bit of a labour of love, but they do look really cool.
So famously and allegedly, Blue Monday by New Order, which was the biggest selling 12-inch of all time, lost money because of the die cutting and the complexity of the cover art. So are you saying that Courier would have made you a millionaire if it wasn't for all the effort you went to cutting out all those covers?
Well, we only do like editions of 20 and still got some left. So yeah, no.
Well, Wu-Tang sold an album for 25 million, one copy or whatever it was.
Yeah, but we're not Wu-Tang, are we?
Sorry, I'm pulling this podcast down to the realms of ridiculous, so we ought to have another song, and it's one of yours. The way that bass just rises up out of the background. Who was that, Stuart?
That was Ellen Arkbro, she's Swedish, and there's a lot of people, mainly women, has to be said, but not exclusively, playing church organs, but with a very kind of modern approach to it. And she's one of those people who, she, her stuff's very kind of long form, slowly evolving, but she's using the organ in a way that it's not really intended to be used. So I find that fascinating. How someone can just kind of an organ's obviously so entrenched into musical history for the reasons we've given, but when someone can find something new, a new way of using that, I find that fascinating. So I've just kind of been diving into her stuff quite a lot recently.
I like that. So it's called Chords for Organ. At least I think it is. That's what the cover art said. I didn't know if that's actually the name of it or.
Yeah, that's the name of the track. But she does other things called Chords for Brass, and then Chords for Brass and Organ. So she on that particular album, she makes a piece for the organ, but then makes a piece for the brass, which is using a similar sort of methodology and thinking, but then brings the two together as well.
I assume that the notes aren't as long for brass, because you'd need like brass players with lungs the size of elephants.
Well, yeah, exactly. So you're exposing, the I can't think of the word, but when you're using an instrument, it comes with its own set of challenges, doesn't it? So
yeah, it's pushing those boundaries that keeps things really interesting, and yeah, we see that quite a lot in the gigs that both of us put on. That's one of the things that always really, really interests me, whether it's like Robin, I've forgotten his last name, shockingly, Robin doing stuff with warped records and all that kind of thing. There's always something interesting. Or we had Callus shouting at a picnic table, which was brilliantly entertaining at Cuckoo Farm. Our friend Matt Birds, his wife kept looking over at their daughter and just mouthing, "Are you okay?" And she was like grinning and nodding, like, "Yes, yes." Yeah, my daughter liked that as well. He was on form, actually. I thought he was particularly good. If you're listening to this, Dan, I'll take it all back. Right, so let's move on to something. Yeah, my choices are getting a little tenuous now, so I'm going to have to explain these. I might have gone slightly over the 30-second limit on that one, but I thought hopefully Bach, which is who it is, it's Toccata and Fuge in D minor, hopefully Bach won't get us a copyright strike on YouTube or on the podcast platforms. But I chose that because that piece of music has been covered so many times by Vanilla Fudge, Procol Harum, just loads and loads of bands have been influenced by that. And I thought it goes to show, when you and I first talked about the theme for this episode, you mentioned looking into the sort of the pop and the contemporary influence of the organ, rather than just this band uses an organ, what the influence might be. So I chose that to give you a platform to express that. I probably should have warned you I was going to do this. Give you a platform to sort of
I'm not sure
unravel some of that idea. Oh no, did I just imagine that?
Yeah. No, but I think you can. You can just imagine that as a guitar solo, can't you? Like the playing, and I think it has. That I didn't know it had been covered by those bands actually, but it makes sense actually, doesn't it? How people would can find something in it that inspires them. But then they're again, like we've just said, they're applying it to guitar or another instrument, and then taking that and then moving it on, bringing it into the now, and just having a fresh approach to like something that's kind of familiar. I mean, I did actually know that one, and because my dad used to play that Bach quite a lot, and he's famous for his
a banger.
Yeah, in modern parlance, yes. Yeah, totally. But I think it's still, I don't know, relevance is a weird word, but like I think people can still find things in it. And then if people are still inspired by it, I think that's a good thing.
I was thinking it kind of is organ prog. The way it sort of starts with a big. It's the wrong way around, isn't it? Prog is guitar, Bach. Oh man, right, I'm getting completely tied up in knots here. Do you know even roughly where I'm coming from?
No, well,
you can say no, I won't be offended.
A lot of organ in prog, and well, lots of instruments actually. That was the idea of it, wasn't it? You just went on these massive, like, spaced out rambles, and like, if you're in a room full of instruments, let's pick up that and have a bash, and like just bring it. And it was like a coming together of all these things, but also about expanding the mind, and like especially in the 60s with psychedelics and everything. So it was kind of this enabling the journey, into new places.
That thing about being in a room full of instruments and just sort of reaching for things. I'm about halfway through the Beastie Boys documentary at the moment, and it's kind of not a documentary. It's a stage show that they recorded, but it's absolutely fascinating. The process, I never knew. I'm so late to the party with modern music, with the Beastie Boys, but I never understood that the first album, basically, they were out on tour and they came back and Rick Rubin went, "Here's your album." Second album, they used a production team, someone. And again, they were sort of that was a move closer to being able to experiment. But the third album, because the second album bombed, the label was contractually obligated to put it out. So they basically just went, well, let's just fill our house full of instruments, as many weird things as we can possibly find. And they spent about a year and a half putting the album together, just by sticking to a schedule, deliberately picking up the wrong instrument for certain bits and just sort of smashing stuff together.
Amazing.
I'd happily spend a year doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, like Rick Rubin was, famous.
Cool.
Still is for like inviting people to his place and like chilling out, but like having a lot of discussion about the music. I mean, like he's called a producer, but he doesn't actually make music, does he? He just kind of he digs into the ideas and like helps the artist to kind of realize something that has moved on from the initial idea. He sort of like encourages the growth and the exploration, and
so he's like a recording studio version of a life coach.
Well, yeah. I was going to say guru, but I mean, maybe that is the right word. But yeah, you can go down a massive rabbit hole when you're making music, can't you? And then quite often it's not the right direction, and you have to like have a word with yourself and go, well, actually, no, we need to sort of back up a bit here and go down that way, But if you've got someone who you can connect with and talk to about that on the way, that's where he's positioned himself. And
paraphrasing, but Freddie Mercury, when he went off to Munich to make his solo album, when he came back, I can't remember who was in conversation with him, and most of these things are probably apocryphal. And they said, how was recording the album? And he said, I had a room full of musicians who did everything I told them to, and that's why the album's shit. Because he didn't have the dynamic of bandmates going, no, that's bad. If everyone's on your payroll doing exactly what you tell them, then you end up sounding like late era Roger Waters albums. just where nobody will say no to you. Right. Can't believe we're here already, but we need to go for your last choice. Whoa! Sorry. Took me by surprise. Yeah, sorry for my exclamation at the start of that, but I clipped this just using my studio monitors. But these are monitoring headphones, so they're really, really wide response. I don't think I heard that bass when I clipped it before, but bloody hell. Who was that?
That was a guy called Robert Curgenven, and I met him in like 2010 or something, maybe. But I've been following ever since then. But I kind of chose that piece because he does use organ, but not exclusively. And he's kind of like in that piece, like he's using turntables. He presses up dub plates. He kind of like he's got field recordings. There's like a whole, a wide palette of sounds and techniques that he's using, and the organ is just one part of that. So I just think it's interesting how he's kind of just, instead of it being this singular, imposing, everything of, it's just a part of all of these other things. And so it can be, can have this power and energy, but it can also be really delicate actually, and just be a part of, something else.
This wins the prize for the highest number in a timestamp for something I've ever clipped. So that the track or the piece is called Bardo, and then in brackets longform, for 3 turntables, pipe organ, and piano, and the timestamp's 50 minutes 10. That's impressive. That is. So what does Bardo mean? Is it? Do you know what it means?
No, I don't actually, but no, but I also did a piece of work for an artist who used that name in the title of her work. So I should know, shouldn't I? But I don't.
When I first saw it on first glance, when you sent the choices, I thought you'd chosen Bardo Pond. You heard of them? Like an American. I don't even know how you describe it. Like scratchy shoegaze, maybe from like the 90s. Sort of imagine shellac, but lots more reverb, basically, and flutes. That. But that's a lovely piece. How do you discover this music, Stuart? I've been sort of meaning to ask you that on a personal level probably since I've met you, because you have this incredibly ability to just pluck something that's not just a little bit outside my experience. It's just so far out and so far away from anything I would stumble across. Do you actively seek it, or does it all just come, the universe just deliver it to you?
Well, it's a bit of both, isn't it? I think, I do look for things, and when you find one thing and then you follow the label, then you follow the other artists on the label. It's like a tree, isn't it? It grows up, and so you end up, and that artist might have a release on another label. So then you've got a new label, and you've got all the artists on that label, and then it just grows. But in this case, I did a workshop in London, and Robert was on the workshop, and I didn't know who he was before that. But then he gave a really interesting talk, and he's quite a character as well. So I was like, oh, he seems cool. So I was like, just started digging into his back catalogue. But now he's made a whole, he's still active. And he just puts out some new stuff, and I find that. But it's the same for a lot of artists and labels, just kind of latch onto something. I mean, I'm not into pop music or anything that's got like a sort of regular kind of structure. I'd find a bit tedious,
Apart from metal.
Yeah, but like even then, it can be a bit boring if it's a bit kind of structured. But I love it when it's all those things are broken apart, and that's why I kind of like noise and field recordings and all that kind of thing, because it doesn't have hardly any structure. It might have some structure, but a field recording just has no structure whatsoever. It's just a random bundle of things,
I will link to your podcast of field recordings in the show notes, which I've not heard them all yet, because I listen to podcasts generally when I'm walking to work, and I've told you before, and I've mentioned it on here before, but I listened to one that you recorded on Oxford Street, I think it was, in central London, and I was walking through Ipswich, which is not that busy, and it kind of stressed me out. So I flipped to another one that was possibly recorded in a church.
Yeah, there's been a few in a church. Yeah,
well, it's kind of like the thing I like about the podcast is I'd never know really what something's going to sound like until I listen to it, but you can pick it according to your mood quite nicely. Now that you've put out several episodes, it's like a sonic chocolate box.
Oh. Well, yeah, it depends. Some people like the toffee ones, other people don't they? So, yeah, I think the most recent
Right,
ones.
I'm going to play this.
Oh, cool.
No, tell us.
The most recent one is I took a ride on a. This is a nice connection. A ride on a narrow gauge railway, which is actually at that farm where I said the organ with the drum kit is. That's a weird connection, but so yeah, you hear me talking.
Oh, wow.
Talking to one of the people who was working there, an enthusiast, and then the small. It's very small. The train. You sit on top of it. You don't sit in it really. So, but you go for a ride on there. So, but yeah, there's a myriad of things on the podcast. So yeah, dig in.
What's it called?
Stuart Bowditch Podcast.
Right, cool. Now I'm going to play my last track, and I'm going to tell you what the tenuous link is. The tenuous link is the organ player in this band who plays with Hammond normally, or did, because he sadly passed away. He went to prison for a while, and when he was in prison, he to explain why he went to prison, he was with a friend, and a friend said, "Oh, can you stop at this off license? I just want to grab some fags." And basically, his friend went into the off license, robbed it at gunpoint, and then casually walked out, got back in the car, and went, "Come on, let's go." And he just drove off, not knowing he was a getaway driver. But that's still, you've still committed the crime, basically. So he had to go to prison. And when the pastor in the prison found out that he was an organ player, he spent most of his time in prison playing the church organ, which it's a tenuous link, but he could also rip an organ. So let's have this. Do I have a guess who that was?
Not even with the backstory, would I get that, I'm afraid. Sorry.
That's the Charlatans, and that track is 9 Acre Court. And this is sort of bringing things full circle for me, because my fascination with loud church organs sort of came from the Charlatans, but also it went the other way as well. And when he played the organ, he looked like he was trying to smash it up. You know, like Keith Emerson, like doing the stuff with the knives. He wasn't doing that. It was just that choppy kind of. He found a way to make the organ almost like a percussive thing, just by stabbing at it really, really quickly. But yeah, I basically chose that because I ran out of ideas and it had a nice sounding organ.
I was just going to. You were saying about the playing in a chapel. It kind of reminded me. Quite a few years ago, I was recording people's memoirs at a hospice, which was a really kind of lovely thing to do. It's a bit emotional, obviously, but one of the people that I recorded was a lady called Olive, and she was the organist at Braintree Baptist Church for 55 years.
55 years?
Yeah. So on the first week, I recorded her speaking about the church and all the other people there and all the work that they did and everything. And then the second week, I just recorded her playing the organ in the chapel at the hospice, which was really it was really quite moving, actually, just to see her passion and for it, and that she was just playing to me and the occupational therapist, but she was giving it some. So yeah, it was quite a special moment. Yeah.
Giving it some welly. There's organs do seem to really bind themselves to the player. I think you're sat. We like. Well, I like guitar and I like bass. I like the synths and I like all the other stuff we do. But I'm not the biggest person, but I have quite a large physical presence. So I physically dominate anything weird thing to say, but I physically dominate any instrument. That's probably why I like bass, because it's a bit bigger. When you play a church organ, you're completely enveloped by it. You're a part of the machine rather than something that's dominating or asserting itself. You have to kind of go with it.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, well, and enveloped by the sound as well, and it's not amplified, is it? It's just an acoustic kind of sound. So yeah, you're kind of completely immersed in that whole environment.
All right, this draws us nicely to an end, and I'm going to say, anyone who's listening, if you made it this far and you're still not curious about going and looking up some really good organ music, just give it a go. And if you're not sure what to do, pick something and listen to it slightly too loud for your health, because of that you might find that it stirs something in you. But I just want to say thank you for listening, everyone. Thanks for kind of everyone who's been getting in contact and interacting with our stuff on the socials recently. And Stuart, I really appreciate your time, and thank you ever so much for, I'm going to say, indulging in me and my church organ fascination. So that was a cracking suggestion.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
Great. I'm going to say goodbye. Would you like to say goodbye?
Bye.